Well, as we continue looking at 1 Peter chapter 5, we come to verse 4, where Paul is continuing with this thought of saying that we've been entrusted by God to be examples to other people, the flock of God. And then he says there's reward. He says, when the chief shepherd appears, you'll receive the crown of glory that does not fade away. I used to jokingly say to my people that I'm not really the shepherd of the flock. I'm just the sheepdog, that my job is to bark at you and direct you and nip at your heels when you get off track. But basically, that doesn't deny the fact that we're called to provide a form of leadership, but we are not the chief shepherds. We are the under shepherds. And I think it's that loss of perspective sometimes that overtakes people, where we think that in ministry that we become somebody important, that somehow we can use the bathroom and it doesn't stink afterwards, that we have this kind of wonderful fragrance about us. And yet the reality is there's probably nothing more unattractive on a man or a woman of God than is an attitude of pride. Pride is kind of like, if I can put it so crudely, kind of the feces of human nature. It puts out a terrible stink and nobody wants to get it on them, especially on their shoes, and take it home. Because its reality is that we're called not to draw attention to ourselves. And certainly, if you step in dog poop, you draw a lot of attention to yourself very quickly. People are going to go, what's that smell? But when you're seeking just to be an example to the flock, to lead them in the way that Christ would lead them as best you know how to, in your little fragmentary moment in time, when you do that, there is a sweet fragrance of Christ. It's like a great cologne, that you smell it on somebody and just go, man, that just is such a satisfying scent. I just love to smell that. And that's what he says, is we want to have the fragrance of Christ. And so we do that by seeking to be as Christ-like in how we choose to live our lives, how we live, behave, act, think, speak. And the more faithfully do that, the more effective we're going to be, the more we will find that people are attracted to what we have to say. And then he talks about the payoff. What is the payoff? And that's where in verse 4 he adds, because when the chief shepherd appears, you'll receive the crown of glory that does not fade away. A crown of glory. Now, there's a TV special that my wife and I watched some time ago called The Crown. It was about, the royal family, and I don't know how much of it was accurate and how much of it was gossip. I'm sure a lot of stuff was made up, but we were kind of fascinated by it because everybody always wants to know, how do those royals live? What's life like in their world? And one of the things after watching that, I concluded is I'm sure thankful that I wasn't born into the royal family. I remember one time we were doing this tour in England, and the tour guide said to me in the first day, she said, of the royal family, they are a dysfunctional lot. I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to venture into that conversation. But she, from their perspective, they say they're just really kind of a train wreck. And there are people who are trying to live up to an image that isn't real. It's just a portrayal of something that's artificial. And it's basically the system they're trying to market to the rest of the world. It has a lot to do with the amount of tourism Britain gets, because people will go to the palaces and they'll look around and watch the royal guard and so forth and so on. But to say all of that, the crown that the world can offer, and it doesn't matter what crown it is, whether it's a crown of being born royalty, or if it's the crown of being wealthy, if it's a crown of being powerful, the idea of being like, I'm president of the United States, and people want that position so bad so that they can, have this quote unquote legacy. Well, in the end of the day, they're going to pass from history and be forgotten. I mean, even the people we remember, we don't remember. We have tons of books written about people like Abraham Lincoln because we don't know who Abraham Lincoln was. We didn't live with him. We didn't have to stay in the same house. We never ate a meal with him. So we live on the rumors that are passed down and the things that he wrote down, but we really don't know the person. And that's the difference, I think, that we need to keep in mind, that we're not called to pretend to be something we're not. As a pastor, I'm not called to pretend to act like a pastor, or at least what I think a pastor should act like. I want to know what the scripture says a Christian is supposed to act like, and to be as good at that and faithful as that as I possibly can be. But it's not about becoming a great pastor. I want to become a great shepherd. I want to become a great servant of God, because that's ultimately my accountability. And I talk about this a lot, but life is so very, very short. We're here for a moment. It's only a vapor. We pass away really quickly. And when you think about your lifetime, if you even think about what's going to happen the rest of this day, it's really important to step back and say, what is going to be my legacy? What is going to be the story of my life? I mean, what is going to be the benchmarks that I'm going to point to? Is it going to be something that's consequential and that people are going to say that my life was enriched because you were part of it? Or are they going to say, I thought I would never die? I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, but if you've ever had to care for aging people who are, gone into dementia, or they've begun to become a vegetable, and you're just waiting for them to leave because you're exhausted caring for them, then essentially you understand what being non-productive, non-impactful can be like. Now, I get it. Sometimes people try to teach us about being caregivers when we have to give care for people who can't care for themselves. I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying, and I don't want you to become uncaring. But the whole point is that I don't want my Christian life to be one where I was just an object that was there for a season and now I'm out of the picture. I want people to have been enriched in the same way that I have been enriched by many people who have ministered to me. So that I had pastors and leaders in my life from early on, from the pastor who prayed with me to receive Christ, who was such a great example, to the first pastor I sat under for several years, who taught me the Word of God and discipled me in that way. He's still alive, pastoring in Arizona, Pastor John Higgins, and then coming as a disciple of Chuck Smith. I mean, those men had profound influences upon my life and my understanding of what it means to be a follower of Christ, and I am very thankful. They weren't perfect any more than I am. They had their warts like everybody does, but they were men who throughout their lives have been committed to walking with Jesus. They were steadfast. 2 of them have gone home to be the Lord and reaping their rewards. One probably is getting pretty close to the closing chapter of it all. But the thing that stands out to me is today they are walking as faithfully with God as they did the first time I met them, and when they called me to follow. And I think what an impact that has upon young people when they see you being steadfast in the Lord. I remember a friend of mine who, when we were at Calvary in Southern California, Calvary Costa Mesa, and he had been working for Maranatha Music and got involved in kind of a split that happened in those days, and he left Calvary and I didn't see him for a while. And I remember one Sunday night at the Bible study, he shows up and I said, Bruce, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I knew if I came back that Chuck would be doing the same thing he was doing when I left. In other words, he'd gone out, gotten caught up in all this Falderdal, all this drama, all this stuff, and it began to become really crazy. He just said, I just need to go back to something that I can trust and rely upon. And that was the whole point of my pastor, Pastor Chuck's behavior. He was the same guy his entire ministry. He did the same thing. He taught the Word, and he focused on the Word, and he was focused on helping us grow in the Word, and he didn't change. And that's where you find that the whole definition of love, according to Shakespeare, is love is something that doesn't change when change takes place. It remains unchanged. If you love somebody, you love them. You don't change when things change. And so as my wife and I, are experiencing as we get older and our bodies are changing and all the dynamics of how we interact together has changed as a consequence, I still love my wife. I still am thankful that I got to spend all these years with her. And I think that it doesn't become something that changes. It's something that becomes more intense, more committed as time goes on. That we begin to realize that these people, their commitment, their steadfast, their faithfulness has really been the shoulders that we've been able to stand on, enable us to go forward and to reach the next level. And that's really what it's all about. That we are basically saying, I want to be able to let other people climb on my shoulder and exceed what I've been able to accomplish and what I've been able to do and accomplish things that are more impressive. Because I know that if I do that, there's a crown of glory that I'm going to receive, that it'll never fade away. Everything else, presidents, kings, rulers, dictators, they all fade and they pass from time and are forgotten. But that crown of glory that we earn because we have committed ourselves to be followers of Jesus is going to be with us forever and ever and ever. Well, one more to go this week. Meet you in a moment.